So extended ID is an IAB standard. I cannot tell you the exact percentage of adoption, but I'm pretty sure it's almost 100% because it's normal to have multiple IDs, because you could have like the maid, like let's say if you take like a fully addressable universe, let's say you're reading on your app the Financial Times or the Economist or the New York Times or whatever. You have the identifier from the publisher because you're logged in, you're paying. Then you have the mobile ad ID, whether it's the iPhone or the Android ID. And then you could have like a partner like us ID. So it's normal to have multiple IDs. So the extended ID concept has been using for a long time. What is maybe a bit more novel is to be able to enrich that with partners that have a consent. Before like all of the adoptions of privacy laws, they were often sending all of this inside the main ID. But the problem is you can get into trouble because you don't know where it comes from. In the consent, you would say, this ID comes from ID 5, the consent was gathered X and Y. So basically you declare how these identifiers are being used. So ID 5 has maybe 30 partners. So out of our 45 DSPs, we're sending about I think 10, 12 IDs, but on some of them, like BitSwitch or Magnite, they are also themselves connected to other DSPs. So I would say probably half and a bit more of our publishers, of our DSPs can read the extended ID. And then with ID5, we're working on some of them, like Google is not yet participating. So we're working with them to get them to read the extended ID from ID5. Because again, like Google has the PID, which is their own thing, but for podcasts, it's complicated. So we're trying to work on behalf of the whole industry to bring that type of IDs as well. Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of stuff. So it depends how you see it. So there's a lot of things podcasts only. So ID5 is one partner, but we need to have clean room technologies. We need to have the capacity to do the overlap of the different data sources. So that means signing deals with data providers, CDPs, DMPs, all of the letters of the alphabets to try to connect them and then create an overlap. So that's one work. The other one is in research to improve the Triton synthetic ID. So what we do is to connect multiple user agents and multiple IPs, because you could be listening to streaming on TuneIn or the iHeart app, and then consuming podcasts on Apple Podcasts, but maybe also you're listening to the Financial Times podcast on the Financial Times app. So we're connecting based on a mix of IP, timestamp, geo, and content type, multiple user agent, and scoring them as being the same user. And then the IP address, you may have the home, the office, the kindergarten, the university. So we're connecting that to help create a unique ID that connects the whole universe from streaming, podcasts, and all of that. So that's on one thing. Then the other thing is, because again, we do everything in audio, including broadcast, we're trying to build things to leverage the best of everything. So on a lot of streaming, it's logged in data. So you go on the iHeart app, you're logged in. So we have like actually UUID2. But then you go on Apple Podcasts, we've got nothing. But if we connect the two, we improve the podcast. Podcast is more specialized content. So it means that maybe someone is just listening to like the top 50 music station. So like that's half the population in the US. But then they listen to podcasts about Chinese history. So suddenly you qualify that listeners with something more precise. So that's how you combine the assets. And then again, because our publishers are also radio broadcasters, they're also surveys and panels. And I know in the digital space, often people are saying like, whoa, there's no cookie ID, like it's worth nothing. But it's not true, because as you know, because you hosted Daryl a few times, we have like Demos Plus. So we can run surveys, learn about the audience. So we also use this to infuse. So we built a graph based on one-to-one connection, on socio-demographic traits coming from surveys. Then we have Sounder now, so we can do contextual brand safety characteristics. So this is all in a mix to provide a better characterization of both the content and the user. And this is what we're pushing to the DSPs, either via a deal or directly to the publishers, for them to be able to purchase the audio at the right value, as well as the proper share of wallet in terms of how much you should be investing to report back. And then we're working with a lot of attribution and campaign performance vendors to just make sure we're sending the right signal. There's a lot of podcast-only vendors, but the reality is when you talk to large-scale agencies and brands, it needs to be connected to the whole ecosystem they've got. So it's okay to work with podcasts only, it's okay to work with streaming only, but the best is to connect to the core platform. So this is what Triton is working on. And then again, AI. We've been doing AI forever, because machine learning for invalid filtration, frequency capping, forecasting, we've been doing that for years. The novelty is Gen AI. So we're looking into working with companies like Audio Stack to produce creative on the fly, but also on ourselves for forecasting, helping target, learn behavior based on conversion. So these are in our back kitchen, testing different methods and figuring out how to leverage this.